It is time to introduce our first guest on stage today, Pam Fredman. Welcome.
Thank you.
You are the president of the International Association of Universities and also the rector of the University of Gothenburg.
2 more weeks.
2 more weeks, exactly. Welcome, the stage is yours.
Thank you. And I just put the... So thank you very much for having me here at this meeting. And I have been talking to some of you in the morning because I think it's very difficult to come in the second day. I don't know what you have been discussing already. It might be embarrassing what I'm saying. But I think I'm going out from the international perspectives and also from the International Association of Universities. And of course, some of the perspectives I'm giving, it's really my point of view I'm giving up. So, which one? Yeah. Interesting. Okay, which one? That one. Okay, so just a short introduction to the International Association of Universities. And it was actually created already in the 1950s. Under the auspices of UNESCO. And I'm mentioning this because we do have today a large number of different networks around the world. And there is a competition. And I might say that maybe we start to have too many to really be having a power to make policies around the world. So this is an old, and it's the only global network of universities, I would say. It's also non-government, and it's still partner of UNESCO, and we are located at the headquarters of UNESCO. And we are also comprising 650 universities around the world, and that's my picture I will give to you when it comes to recognition and an alternative path. This is where we are distributed, and I'm showing this map just because I think that when we talk about mobilization, mobility of individuals, if it's voluntary or if it's forced, and you have a focus on refugees, we have to remember that refugees are found all around the world. The number we are having here in Europe, I would say maybe is not the large number, and therefore we have to also think about international perspective. What is the situation in other countries when it comes to refugees? And I will mention some of those issues. I'm not going through the vision and mission, I'm just bringing up one thing, and that is the vision to promote and advance a dynamic leadership role for higher education in society. I will come back to that because I think that the leadership of higher education institutions is very, very important for really working with the mobilities and issues of recognition and so on. It's also important that we share values and we share knowledge between each other. I would also bring up to see that if we look at the leadership and talk to the leadership around the world, we will also recognize the diversity. We might talk from a European, we know that we're not saying the same thing in Europe, and when it comes to looking into the whole world, we are really in different areas, and we have also different values that we have to take into consideration. I will go back and bring up education as a prerequisite for saving the planet. IAU has recently done a survey and looking into how many of the higher education institutions knows about the Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm happy to say that a large number, 74% of those answering knows about these. And I think that's a step forward in comparison with previous goals we have seen. And I think that that is a very good startup to see that we all can work for the education. Knowledge has no borders, and I think that we hope that will never be the case. So internationalization has, of course, been a very important thing, and it's, as I said before, voluntary or forced internationalization or mobility. And I think that you already have talked about maybe the Global Convention on Recognition of Higher Education Qualification project. And I will come back to that. And I would say that during my years as director and also in IAU, I would say that the perspectives of internationalization has shown diversity. There is issues like the awareness of the mobility, how to take care of the people when they really come to new countries. It is the willingness to pay for this. I mean, there is more and more a market for higher education institutions, more private institutions in many countries. So there is a lot of different issues coming up with internationalization. And as the convention is saying that we should have recognition as a global right, I think that's completely correct. We have to recognize people's knowledge. And I think not only for refugees, this is in general, it also have to do with employment, that we recognize different kinds of capacities. And I would like to also emphasize that it is the higher education institutions that fulfill the global needs for education and education for all. So whatever they say in policies or in documents of various kind, we have to see to that the higher education institution have the capacity, has the willingness, and has the interest of really implementing those things. And I raise again the private and public funding and tuition fees. It's still a case all around the world that the low-income people in many countries never go to higher education. Public funding is going down in many countries, and many governments sees that privatizations of higher education, that's a way to go. One should know that private higher educations could be very good, but there are also issues coming up about corruption. They buy their right to give exams in some countries. It also that many of the private higher education institutions, they are not interested in all types of disciplines. Humanities and social sciences is not the focus. The focus is in majority of technology and economy, and to some extent in medicine. And then when it comes to the recognition of prior learning, it is the curricular. And I know that you discussed this yesterday, and I would raise this issue that there are signs now of censored course content. And there was an article some weeks ago describing that 29 of the best universities in China now has put more hampers on the curricula for the students, and there should be no westward values in that curricula. And one can consider what is happening when they go abroad and brings in other knowledge. How is that taken care of? Education of refugees, we go to this. I know that you have brought up figures already yesterday. We know that 50% is younger than 18 years, and we don't even talk about higher education institutions. We talk about education for all. There is a lot of these people who never come to school and will have a long way to go when and if they go back to their countries and if they come to other countries. And as I said, very few percentage of those goes to higher education and get access to higher education. And I think that we do, and in Sweden we do quite a lot to see to recognition and help in many ways. But a large number is not in Europe, and large number is found around the world. And those being close to Syria, for example, in Lebanon, Jordan, and so on, they have a great problem because there is no money for the education from the beginning, and particularly not higher education, and how to handle this situation with millions of people arriving into their countries. So we have to consider education in host countries, but we also, I think, for the future have to see how could we help with education in refugee camps. And I think that to go anywhere on this, I think that the funding has to be, and the giving of money has to go quite a lot to the refugee camps to do anything about this. So what is IAU activities? And this is a list of what IAU has been doing for many years. It has been working for higher education and education for all, about access and success. And The figures around the world is not very promising right now, and in particular the access for people from low-income families and non-academic backgrounds. Education for sustainable development has been on the agenda for IAU for many years. And IAU was also lead partner in the network of UNESCO when it came to the Global Action Program on ESD. And we were also involved in Nagoya before the 17 goals were made. And I think that IAU had a large impact on even getting education on as one of the goals. It was nearly that we had no education at all. And my opinion is that there is no goals reached if we don't have education around the world. Internationalization has been on the agenda for many years. And what I would raise is intercultural dialogue. And that is, as I mentioned before, there are different values around the world, and there is a lot of diversity. And when it comes to recognizing prior learning and backgrounds, I think that we have to maybe talk a little bit more about those, the intercultural dialogue, and use that. And leadership development, as I have mentioned before, I think that that is absolutely of greatest importance, that we have leaderships in the higher education institution, and that we can help each other and share knowledge between each other in many cases. And then the last of is the information and communication technologies. And I was discussing this just this morning. I mean, of course, we talk about that we can use the new types of technologies, and I think that that is a way, and that is a complement to the higher educations anywhere, and also on camp learning. I would like to raise the issue that MOOCs is used everywhere, and I would say that politician doesn't know at all what MOOCs is, and MOOCs is used for any kind of communication or ICT learning or distance learning, which is not correct. I think we have a responsibility to see what kind of learning and communication do we use these tools for. And it's not just a question of having money for these tools. It's also a question of how we use this, not to use as an information channel, but to a learning channel, so that we do not lose academic skills as the lowest value for what we are doing. So I think that there is a lot of to do with this, and but I know that you discussed yesterday that distant learning, there is a skepsis. I have also been among those with skepsis. I think it is a complement. It's a complementary tool. And I will give one example, and that is what we have used at our university in Gothenburg. And that was we were part of the JAMIA project, which is from an NGO in Great Britain. And we started a course on 7.5 credits in one of the campuses in Syria. And it was on information technology. And we were able to give these individuals their scores. I think also this type of technology could be used for taking care of. We have a lot of teachers and researchers also being refugees. And they have no possibility at all to develop their skills. And involving those in this type of learning in the campus could be of very, very big value. They also have the language, and they also have the values and the understanding of these cultures. So when it comes to IAU and involvement in prior learning, I couldn't say that we have that as a specific point on the agenda, but I would say that that's part of all the activities I mentioned before. We cannot negotiate, we cannot get outside the recognition of prior learning. So when it comes to the Global Convention of Higher Education Qualifications, the Secretary General, Eva Pegron, I think quite some of you know her, was in the expert group looking at the feasibility for a Global Convention. And then one can be a little bit critical. The draft writing included just government representatives and the higher education institutions representative was not there. And Eva told me that we will be consulted now when the draft, and I heard that it's out for comments right now. It's also important to know that the convention should build on and not be replace the Lisbon Convention. If one listens to around the world about the Lisbon Convention, there is not many who knows anything about that, and that is the other way. We have to implement that, even though we will write documents. How are we working on that people knows about this, and then that they really can help, and that there will be results from this. We also have, which we think is important, I think it's important, as I said it several times now, it is to share best practice. And I know that you will do this afternoon in different working groups. So, and I would mention that in the IAU Horizons magazine, in the latest issue, there was one article which I would mention. And we also have the IAU web portal. And that is an agreement with UNESCO, and that gives the information about 18,000 different institutions around the world, about their programs, about their credits, and so on. So there is a very, very big base for this. And of course, such a base is not valuable if people do not give their information, and also that it is updated all the time. But very recently we had an agreement with UNESCO to continue because they see great value of this. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. We do have time for some questions, so raise your hand if you want to address Pam with a question, and I can start if you're a bit shy in the morning. You touched on it in your speech. In the light of both the refugee situation, but also in the light of increased amount of students being more global in their habits, how or should recognition of prior learning has to be developed?
In my point of view, I think that we are, I don't know how it is in all parts of the world, but we have to recognize things a little bit beyond what is very, theoretical knowledge. Because that's what we see when we bring in people from different countries now to be employed. They should have exactly the same courses as we have in Sweden or whatever. We have to see that they have another capacity and other knowledge. And I would say that academic skills, the potential of learning and developing their content of knowledge, and also to be critical and also to be able to put their knowledge into context. So we don't go into details of a program. And I don't think that there will be one system that fits all. I think that each time when we do whatever, it's ranking, whatever, and we have these boxes to tick off, I think that we are not doing a good thing for being open-minded.
Mm-hmm. Any questions? So, since you're having more of a global perspective, we have more of a Bologna perspective here. How do you think cooperations outside of the Bologna cooperation has to be developed when it comes to recognition of prior learning and alternative study paths?
That the issue of the Bologna system is raised many, many times. And I think that you all know we have not been very good in introducing Bologna everywhere either. I mean, it's still the same thing in Europe that we don't have it. So I think that one should be very, very critical and see to that we don't put up hinders for people coming from other countries, because they do not have the system as we have. There's a lot of good things in Bologna, but I think that we have to be much more open-minded. They don't know about Bologna, and they are not going to introduce Bologna.
And you were a bit critical about how, or maybe the understanding among politicians about MOOCs. What has to be done?
I think that we have a responsibility to tell them what it is. I mean, our government in Sweden has also said that we should have a certain number of a certain proportion of the money we're getting for MOOCs. And I don't think that we are very interested in MOOCs. That's not academic, giving academic skills in my point of view. So what we have to do is take away the word MOOCs and say that we have to use new technologies in different types of learning as a complement to what we are doing, but still taking the value of the academic skills.
Anders, you have a question or a comment?
Yes. Yesterday, some of the speakers, they talked about trust. There's a need to have trust in between higher education institutions and trust in between countries and the different educational systems and so forth in order to recognize even degrees, but also recognize other institutions, recognition of prior learning and so forth. What could IAU do in order to create a greater trust in between higher education institutions? Is there anything special that you can?
I think that the different types of leadership programs and the meetings they are organizing in different areas is to build trust. And I think that each time we have those meetings, I would say that trust is on the agenda, because trust is also part of the ethical values, which is not brought up here, but what we have to work with. So building up trust. And I can say that when we were in Bangkok in November, I had a meeting. It was obvious, and I think that you know that, the trust you need also between the higher education institutions and the society, because we are not getting public funding unless we have the society's trust. I would say still Sweden is doing very well, but there is an increasing mistrust among societies on the higher education institution. And then we have to be strong together and really, and not standing there and saying, we know. We have to listen to the others, and that will help also to get more people into the higher educations in the long run.
Mm-hmm. We have one quite short question.
Hello, I'm Adrian from Romania, from Romanian NARIC. And our centers use a lot your tool, your database. It's very useful. As a recommendation from our side, due to the fact that many system of education have changed in the last years, and you have the databases from long time before, and now being an online tool, maybe you should have also some information regarding system of education before they made the changes, because some of the diplomas disappeared. And in the global movement, there are not only young people, but also people with older degrees, which we don't have any information now, but you still have it, and it's just archived and not usable anymore.
No.
Thank you.
That's very good to say that, because that's another thing. We talk about students' mobility right now, but we also have individuals who took their courses, and that is the case within a country too. They took their education 20, 30 years back, and the curricula was completely different at that time. So I take the message. Thank you.
Okay, a big hand for Pam Fredman.